Huzzah! It is amateurist attempteth, and today we're making ye olden lasagna, the world's oldest lasagna. It is a recipe by Max Miller, aka Tasting History. Everything that you know about lasagna, discard it, because this is ye olden lasagna. And while it isn't technically his recipe, he does present it, and so I'm going off of what he did in his video. The recipe dates back to 1390, a cookbook from the time before time, a time unknown to humans, although we do have some record of it, and that record contains a recipe for lasagna. It is a little strange because it uses bread flour and water, and that's mostly it, and then you boil the flour once it's hardened in some beef stock. Season it with a mixture called a powder douce, which is weird because why would I drop a douce in my lasagna? But it might be appetizing. I mean, if it has Max Miller's seal of approval, we gotta try it ourselves. And before we get this video started, before you find out how all of this went, I want to kindly ask you to subscribe, maybe even drop a like, write me a comment for future suggestions for recipes, help boost my engagement because I really need it. As you can see, my sub count kind of small. If you could bring that up, it'd be greatly appreciated. Now the first step is to make your own lasagna noodles, your own pasta sheets. And to do that, he recommends you slowly drizzle half a cup of water into 2 cups of flour. But I'm just gonna dump it all at once because I have no patience. I'm not gonna lie, I initially said that dumping it all in at once as a joke, but I think I'm actually gonna do that. Because what does he know, all right? What does he know? All right, maybe he knows a thing or two. It's not going well, I'm not gonna lie to you. The water is going everywhere except inside the flour. It's becoming quite a difficult task to incorporate it all. If this is all the water that we get for this recipe, this is extremely low hydration dough, which I just don't know how it's going to adhere to itself when it doesn't have any sort of moisture to help it bind. I refuse to believe that in ye olden medieval times that people were kneading dough for 15 minutes straight. Like, didn't you have to defend the castle or something like that? Like, and it's like in the crevices of my skin. Probably not the most appetizing thing to hear, but don't worry. We're gonna boil it, it'll be fine. A little boiled skin water, a little splash of water, help it come along a bit. Hopefully this makes this task a bit easier. I mean, it just looks terrible. It looks like the shaggiest ball of dough you've ever seen in your life. This sounds great. How is this simultaneously too wet and too dry? That doesn't make any sense. Yeah, it's too dry and too wet at the same time. How is this possible? And there you have it. A ball of dough, not really as smooth or as cohesive as his. It's been 15 minutes, I've been kneading for that long and I can't really do it for much longer. I used a bit more water and somehow got a drier product than he did. Not sure what I did wrong, but I'm exhausted after that bout with this dough. So we're gonna set it aside for 20 minutes and then we're gonna start working on our douce. So we got half a teaspoon of grains of paradise in here. Next, we're gonna add 1 teaspoon of ground nutmeg. Obviously, if you can grind it fresh, that would be better, but I don't wanna spend $20 on nutmeg. So I just bought pre-ground. We're making a semi-sweet beef stock lasagna, so it's really fine. Don't worry about it. So 1 teaspoon of ground nutmeg goes into the grains of paradise mixture, then 2 teaspoons of ground cinnamon. Next is 2 teaspoons of ginger, which is weird. Man, wow. And last but not least, the most essential component for our douce is a tablespoon of sugar. Because what's a douce if not a little sweet? I'm gonna try the douce on its own just because I am very curious about it. It smells very potent, like not something you would want in your lasagna. Yeah, why is there sugar in this? This is like a savory, sweet, kind of weird, but whatever, bon appetit. Okay. It starts off really overwhelming, but then it mellows out into a cinnamon, sugar, ginger combination. Almost like a cookie, but like a shitty cookie. A douce cookie, if you will. Well, now that our douce mixture is complete, all that's left is to make our pasta into sheets, and we'll boil it in some bone broth, some beef broth, some meat stock. And that should be about it. Is it supposed to be sticking to the rolling pin? I think we're getting somewhere. I rolled this out as thin as I possibly could. My triceps were burning in the process. It was a bit of a task, which is crazy to me because how did they have the time and will to do this in medieval times? Weren't they worried about the plague? Didn't they have bigger fish to fry other than making lasagna? This is kind of thick actually, even though I spent a good amount of effort and time rolling it out. It's still thicker than I think it should be. He said paper thin, but it's looking a little paper thick. I don't know. but we're gonna let it dry regardless and hopefully move on to the next step, which is boiling it in the beef stock and then adding some cheese and calling it a day. And our noodles have been fully cooked. Now, the only thing left is to assemble this with chopsticks, just like they used in medieval England. So the order is noodles, cheese. We have some grated Gouda here, just like he uses. The pasta smells a bit funky, I'm not gonna lie. And then our douce, I'm just gonna drop that gently into the pasta dish, spread it around, make sure that the douce gets on every inch of the pasta for maximum seasoning flavor. And we're gonna repeat that process 3 more times, and that's pretty much it. Then you're gonna have your medieval lasagna good to go. Now that we have our medieval lasagna finally assembled, all that's left is to try it. Got my douce nicely spread out on there. Some Gouda cheese on top, melted a little bit. And that is surprisingly good, is what I would say if it was actually edible. That's just not the combination of flavors you want. I mean, you get some of that ginger on the back end, giving you a subtle spice, while there's an overbearing flood of cinnamon flavor with a touch of sweetness, which makes perfect sense when it goes with the meat stock accompanying the pasta, and then the unctuousness from the cheese. It's just a horrible blend of flavors. Really not what you want to try, and not suited towards the modern palate. Maybe in ye olden times, this was quite the luxury dish, but right now, it's terrible. Not something I would make again. I have nothing nice to say about it, but it was fun to make, if nothing else. And with it, that saideth, I would like to thanketh my patrons because they give me money and I really appreciate that. Thank you to Egox, thank you to Mutant, thank you to Max Jin, and thank you to Lisa. Thank you so much. I appreciate your support. Thank you to everybody on the fridge. If you too would like to get on the fridge or just support the show in general, the link to the Patreon is in the pinned comment below. I'm gonna leave that there.